Hi, it's Julia, and I have a tragedy of a family scale. The thing is, my mom's a gamer, and she is the type of gamer that forgets about the outside world and loses everything for the game. As they say, nothing seemed to go bad. As far as I can remember, my parents worked, and I was with a nanny or went to kindergarten. It got to a point when they both had only a weekend a few times a month. But our family needed it because we paid a loan for the house. I didn't particularly know my parents because we practically didn't talk. Nevertheless, I was sure they loved me and that we had a good and typical family. We spent all the holidays together. On my birthday, there were carnival parties and animators. On Christmas, Dad acted out Santa Claus's arrival, even when I had already guessed that he didn't exist. And all that stuff. We also spent vacations together. If my parents' vacation wasn't at the same time as my holidays, they just bought a certificate from my family doctor and officially allowed me to hang out right in the middle of the school year, but with textbooks, so as not to fall behind the school program. Anyway, such a typical ordinary life. Yep, like the American dream. A home, kids, and lovers, and home cookies right from the pan. We didn't have a dog, but that's a little thing, right? But there was a real cherry garden, like a dozen cherry trees right behind the house. Incidentally, I was a part of this family life. I studied, did ballroom dancing as a hobby, and I wore lace dresses until 14. Then I grew up. But I also didn't cause any problems during the teenage period. I just became a little more independent, and my parents decided that we didn't need a nanny. Moreover, I went to look for a job as a nanny with the neighborhood kids. And then it turned out the company where my mom worked closed and went bankrupt. Mom was left without a job. And as a responsible person, she tried to find something else. But she was already 45, so there was no use. But nothing terrible happened. By this time, the loan was over, and Dad earned enough money for living, and there was even still something to put away for a rainy day. So, at the family meeting, my parents decided that Mom should become a housewife from that moment on. In my opinion, Dad was the happiest person about this turn. Mom was fond of cooking. She even took courses with some French chef, and she started to feed us with delicious food every day. The house sparkled with cleanliness. Of course not without the help of a housekeeper. Dad's shirts were ironed with love and care, and my mom finally blossomed and tasted life. I was a little bothered that now they were looking after me. Well, it's not about cameras and wiretapping. Just my mom sometimes got bored, and she started to check my homework, tried to know about my personal life and stuff. I wasn't used to so much attention. It really worried me. And I told her about that as politely as possible. Mom seemed to understand and switched to watching the neighbors and gardening. I understood that my mom wasn't used to sitting still. Housekeeping took time and energy, but this problem could quite easily be solved if there was some help. The garden also didn't need constant care. The courses were helpful for her too, but not in non-stop mode, and the daughter was almost an adult. Anyway, Mom was simply bored and had nothing to do. She did the things nobody wanted to, and with damage to herself. This is for the neighborhood patrol, because there wasn't anything interesting except gossip. And I really wanted to help her. Together, we started to look for some kind of hobby that would captivate my mother. I even brought her to dance classes, to an adult group, but for some reason, she didn't get it. Then we tried macrame, knitting, floriculture, and floristry, but nothing was for her. One thing was boring, another one didn't bring pleasure. Another hobby my mom simply considered stupid and useless. I even wanted to motivate her to open her own business. Why not? There are many housewives doing something at home which also brought in money. For example, the neighbor from the opposite side of the street made homemade jam and sold it. And by the way, we always took a couple of jars. Another neighbor made awesome hats and sold them through Instagram. We also had a mini kindergarten and a book lover club based in the library. Anyway, there were a lot of possibilities to do something. Mom liked the idea, but she seemed to misunderstand me. She wrote a novel and was fascinated for a while, but everything was cut off at the publication stage. There wasn't a publisher who wanted to take it for sale. Then, my mom tried to sell the novel herself, on the internet. And unexpectedly, she came across an interesting direction. Advertising. She really liked to promote herself. And then there were real clients who she also promoted. And she started doing it for a fee. And it turned out so cool for her that the neighbors had Instagram, just went to some cosmic heights in a couple of months. A neighbor even had to hire assistants to handle the orders. And Mom, meanwhile, was already working on 3 more projects. If I knew how it would end, I would have taken her computer from her back then. And so me and my dad were just happy and told her how wonderful she was. One of the clients came to her with a request to promote an online game on the network. To understand the mechanism, Mom decided to play a little herself and then start advertising. And suddenly, she became addicted to it. She brought her first game to top sales in 2 weeks. And in between advertising, she sat on the server for hours. She was so fascinated by the painted world with the painted people. But this wasn't a disaster either. Everyone is playing. Even I have a trendy game on my phone. Although I'm not a fan of gaming. But after one game, the second one, then the third, and then Dad found that Mom spent all of her income on gaming stores like Steam. And I noticed the last time my mother approached the stove was a couple of weeks ago, and if we didn't have the housekeeper, we would be living in dirt and starving. My dad and I pulled Mom into reality and talked rather rudely to her. At first, everything was peaceful, but Dad lost control and everything turned into a scandal. Mom said she was finally happy, and no one has the right to take pleasure from her. That's right, but not to the detriment of the family. Duh. And then there began a slow fall into the abyss. Okay, she didn't cook or clean the house, but Mom totally stopped taking care of herself. She didn't sleep for days, didn't wash, forgot to eat, and even went to the toilet with a laptop in her hands. She completely stopped paying attention to my dad and me, and forgot about working too. Now she only worried about the games. And she wasn't just playing. No, she was stubborn and became a true gamer. Played a debate on the network, streaming, participated in competitions, also on the network of course, and also sold some game artifacts. Anyway, she had no problems with money at all, and she didn't spend it anywhere except for games. At some point, Dad got tired, and he insisted on a compulsory treatment. I agreed, because I also didn't see any other way out, and my mom was taken to a hospital. There, she came to her senses, although she repeated that she didn't expect such a betrayal from the family, and now she hates me and my dad. But she forgot about the computer, took a course of pills, and started to respond more adequately to the people around her. After the hospital, she was okay for exactly 1 week. And then she looked at the calendar and went back to the game tournaments. We persuaded her. I cried, but she didn't care what was happening right here. In the end, Dad left us. He didn't even file for divorce, and continued to pay the bills for the house and my studies. He called me to go with him. And I would have left, but I couldn't leave my mom alone in this state. Then, I still thought I'd be able to help her. I fed her from a spoon, begged, cried, but Mom didn't seem to hear me. And after getting a VR helmet, she stopped hearing me literally, having completely gone into virtual reality. Now, I had to not only feed her, but also do all kinds of hygiene procedures. I tried to send my mom back to the hospital, but they told me she was healthy. Things that happened to her weren't a disease, but her conscious choice. She liked it so much, it was more comfortable for her to live on the network than in reality. And this was also a choice, no matter how strange it seemed to others. So I finally lost hope. And although I continued to stay nearby, I understood more and more that my mom didn't need the outside world or me. In the end, we made a decision and sent her to a special boarding school where she had round-the-clock surveillance, a nurse and medical assistance if necessary. This was the last time I saw my mom and talked to her, looking into her eyes. She agreed to this option and signed all the necessary papers. Now, I study at college and live with my dad. We sold our house and transferred the money to the boarding school account where my mom lives. My dad and I rented an apartment in the center of the city and live a quiet, almost invisible life. A completely ordinary life, like this nightmare didn't really happen. Sometimes I go to see my mother, just to make sure she's okay, but she doesn't look forward to seeing me if I'm not one of the thousands of players in her virtual world. So for dates, you have to put on a helmet and boot into the game. It's such a pastime with a relative, right? But she seems to be okay, not even losing weight. So everything's okay. But Dad never comes to visit her. He can't forgive her for forgetting about us, about the family, for something that doesn't really exist. I understand him because I feel the same, but it's easier for me. I also think this is a disease. Although doctors say the opposite. Write in the comments if you like computer games, and whether you've met people like my mom. Share videos with fellow gamers, and never change reality to a made-up world, because it really hurts for those who stay outside.